want to welcome everybody, all of the people that were graceful enough to join us tonight, even though we started temporarily or possibly permanently switching our classes from Thursday night to Wednesday night. And just for whoever wants on the virtual world, from the Torah Anytime world or anybody else where you're listening to this, that if you want to join our live Zoom classes, it's every Wednesday night at 9 p.m. And if you want to, you can get the link to join the WhatsApp where all the information is posted there. You could email me at rabbizitron@torahanytime.com. So we can, or you could just look at that email address from the Torah Anytime page. So anyways, let us get started. So the reason for this topic and this class on the Pirkei Avot series is that one of the things that I learned, Baruch Hashem, I was taught more. I could say that I was taught more than I learned early on in my public career, let's call it, is that many times people come to you with questions, with situational issues, and one of the things that I realized and I was learned and I was taught is that the more that you learn the origin of where they come from, the more that you can understand the question that they have, and the more appropriately you can answer them to the real question that they're really asking. And that is why what I'm trying to do to make it also like, if I do, in Meretz Hashem, with Hashem's help, if I do get through the Pirkei Avot series, it's going to be phenomenal because it's going to be historical. There's going to be so many different aspects of it that are so important, and because of that, the Satan works always so hard to prevent it from happening, because it's going to be historical with amazing different types of stories in history. You learn history, you learn about character development, becoming a better person. There's so much to uncover in this series, but hopefully, Meretz Hashem, that we'll be able to finish this. But one of the aspects is that if we get to understand the people that are speaking, the authors of the Mishnahs in the Pirkei Avos, we'll get to learn a lot about where they're coming from. And that is why tonight, in Meretz Hashem, with Hashem's help, we're going to be learning about Shimon HaTzadik, but we're also going to be learning about Alexander the Great, which coincided during the same time period. And the more that we learn about someone, the more that we can understand where that person is coming from, the more that we can understand the Mishnah. I can't emphasize this enough. There is so much you can learn. I have this frequently happen where people call me up for, let's say, questions, and I start grilling them about questions that are completely unrelated to the questions that they're asking me. And I don't usually tell them why I'm asking this, but I'll tell you guys why I'm asking this, because the more I learn about the origin of that question, the more that I can answer that question. So, and this is really the story behind anything. If you learn, and this is why I was, and I still am, very, very, pro pushing or think the importance of understanding the history of something or the story of something. When you look at different Yom Tovim that we discussed over the years about the stories about different Yom Tovim, it teaches you so much about that Yom Tov because you understand where that the essence of where that comes from, the history of where that comes from, and it really plays an important aspect of your understanding of the whole thing in its entirety. So, with that being said, I want to start off with, first we have to start off, we're learning tonight, Le'ilu Nishmat, Rabbi Avram ben Chaim Yehuda, and Yecheskel ben Rabbi Avram. So we're going to start off with speaking about Alexander the Great. And Alexander the Great, it's very interesting that he has the name The Great as his last name. When you say Alexander, most people can understand that it ends off with Alexander the Great. The interesting aspect of this is that probably one of the most famous human beings that ever lived prior to the age of the internet, because that completely disrupted the entire universe of fame. But before the internet age, you could probably say that Alexander the Great was probably one of the most famous human beings that ever lived. The most famous, and in fact, his all his conquests and the way that he conquered were inspired by Caesar, by Augustus, by Mark Antony, by Napoleon, by Hitler. Again, not the greatest people in history, but he inspired a lot of people. And there's a lot. It's a very I don't want to say that it's rich in history, but it's been utilized very, very heavily. And the truth of the matter is, it really was rich in history, but for different reasons. The country which he originated from was actually a kind of a country near Greece. It wasn't actually near Greece, but really what happened was that Greece had a bunch of different lands that everybody was competing. There was Athens, there was Sparta, there were a bunch of, there's Macedonia, there was different areas that everybody was kind of fighting with everybody for hundreds of years, and they couldn't get, there wasn't like one general ruler over the Greece as we know today. There was kind of like a series of conflicts that were over these, at this point in time, were cities or countries. And what happened was, during the 4th century, about the year 370 BCE, there was a king that came out of Macedonia, and he was known as Philip of Macedon, and he was the father of Alexander the Great, and he was a very, very, he was a phenomenal warrior, and he was able to, over the period of many years, I think it was about 7 years, he was able to like unite all of the Greek city-states, meaning, so you had you had Athens, you had Sparta, you had Thebes, you had Macedonia, and everybody had their own rulership. He, after many hundreds of years, I believe it was about 500 years of everybody fighting with everybody, he was able to unite them all. Now, although he did unite them all through terror, through force, through killing many people, but pushing that aside, he did unite them. And Alexander was the son of this King Philip. This King Philip had many wives. He had probably about 8 wives, and Alexander's mother was Olympias. And when he was born, she kind of put in his mindset that he was a divine birth. She gave him very, very godlike features, even, like godlike beliefs of himself, even since he was young, that he was descended from heroes and gods and things like that, which anybody who knows the history of Greece can attest to how that can easily fall into play. Now, when he was 13 years old, Alexander was able to tame a horse. There was a very, very wild horse that nobody could tame. And Alexander came to his father, and he said, I'm going to be able to do it. And he was actually able, at 13 years old, he was able to complete this feat, which was not an easy feat. He was able to tame this huge horse, this like elephant of a horse, by the name of a Bucephalus. This horse he was able to tame, and this became his horse. Whenever you see pictures of Alexander, usually the pictures are associated with him and his horse. You see it's with this horse. This is the horse that he took. This is probably one of the most famous horses in history. Just like Alexander was one of the most famous people in history, this horse was also one of the most famous horses in history. And when this horse died, in a battle, Alexander was so, perturbed. He was so grieved by it that he named many cities after that. Something that you have to know about Alexander the Great is that he named many cities after himself. Alexandria, for example, in Egypt was named after him. So Alexander named a city after his horse. That's how connected he was with this horse. It was known as Alexandria Bucephalus, known after his horse. So this he was able to accomplish by the age of 13. He had a very, very high-level education back in his day. He was taught by none other than Aristotle. And Aristotle taught him about philosophy, medicine, scientific, investigations, scientific, discoveries. By the time that he was 20 years old, King Philip, his father, was assassinated, and now he became king. Now, a 20-year-old kid, becoming king doesn't usually take so well to the population, but he took a very, very strong stand. He firmly established his rule. He went and he took the throne at the age of 20, and if anybody went and revolted against him, he destroyed them. And in fact, there was a city called Thebes that resisted him, and he destroyed it completely. He only saved one person, a poet by the name of Pindar. Not that it matters, but he's killed everybody, saving only one person. So he established his rulership very, very firmly. And he started going and he started conquering lands. He was a very good, according to historians, he was a good conqueror. He wasn't good, keeper of the conqueror lands, but he was able to conquer lands very, very well. And he was able to do something that his father was not able to do. His father, Philip, conquered all of Greece, united all of Greece, but the one thing that his father couldn't do, and it's probably, according to historians, the reason is that his mother, Olympias, convinced him that this is his destiny, is that he was able to conquer the Persian Empire. So to understand the Persian Empire, this happened during the Persian Empire, of what we can understand the Persian Empire, that's the Perm story. This happened after the Perm story. So the Persian Empire ruled the entire world at that point in time. And Greece, now Alexander wanted to go and conquer the Persian Empire, now he will rule the entire world. And we know that HaKadosh Baruch Hu showed Nebuchadnezzar a dream of all the empires that would rule the world. And the first part of the dream has already been fulfilled. We know Babylon was ruling the entire known world, and then Persia ruled the world. And now it was time for the third kingdom, and that was the Hellenistic Empire with the Greece kingdom, and that was under the Alexander the Great. And this is where it started. He was like the star, show. Actor in this, in this play. Now, Alexander, there's a lot of very interesting stuff that's mentioned about him in history. He was a heavy drinker, substance abuser. He constantly lost self-control, had a violent temper, was so, inconsistent that he would arbitrarily murder his advisors and his close friends, people that think, the sad thing is that when people hear about famous people in history, it's kind of selective fame. They don't know everything. Alexander, even though he accomplished a lot, he wasn't the greatest person. He had many desires, and he kind of indulged in all of them because he could have. And in fact, on this, the Gemara in Talmud, page 32, Lamed Beis Amud Beis, says a story about him, that one time he sat behind this running brook to eat a meal, and he was eating salted fish. So he took the fish and he dipped it into the water to wash off the brine. And when he ate it, when he smelled it, it had an exceptional aroma. He said something is different about this water. And he started traveling along this brook, and he realized that this water comes from somewhere in Gan Eden. And this is what the Gemara says, that he followed the brook and he arrived to the gate of Gan Eden. And he called out in a loud voice, "Open the gate for me." And they responded based off a pasuk in Tehillim. This is in Tehillim chapter 118 verse 20. This is a gate of God, and only righteous people come through it. So Alexander replied, "But I'm a king. I'm an important person. If you're not going to open the gate for me, at least give me something." So they gave him from Gan Eden a skull. And he took the skull and he put it on a scale. And on one side he put this skull, on another side he put all his silver, all his gold that he could have. And the funny or the weird or the odd thing out is that this skull, which didn't weigh a lot, outweighed constantly all this gold and all the silver that he had. So he went over to the Chachamim, went over to the sages, and he says, "What's going on over here? I got this skull, and I can't outweigh it." So they responded to him, and they said, "This is the skull of a mortal man. This is a human being. And its weight is so great because it lusts after all existing gold and silver." And then he replied back to them, how do I know that you're speaking the truth, that this is really what this is, it's a human skull and it's lusting after gold and silver? And they said, very simple test. You take some soil, some dirt, put it over the eye of the skull, and then see what happened. He put it over the eye of the skull, it was satiated, and then he was able to, and then the gold and the silver outweighed the skull. And maybe we could say that the reason why this was shown to him is because this was his personality. His personality was that he was never satisfied. He was always trying to achieve more. He was always trying to get more. He was never satisfied with what he had. When Alexander came to the Near East, where he campaigned against the superpower Persia, he sent a message to the Jewish people in Eretz Yisrael, in Israel. And he said, give me some help me out over here. So the Kohen Gadol, which was the spokesman at that time, he responded back, we can't help you because we have given our oath to Darius. Darius was at that point in time the Persian ruler, not to bear arms against him. And we gave the word and we're not going to transgress it. So they kind of stuck with the Persian side. The Gemara in Yuma, page 69a, relates a story regarding the Kusim. The Kusim went and they denounced the Jews to Alexander. And before I tell you the whole story of what's going to be about to be happening in this, based off this Gemara in Yuma, we have to understand who are these Kusim. So we have to go way back to the 10 tribes, and this is a famous topic. People love this topic, the exile of the 10 tribes. So if we understand the origin of this, we can understand a little bit better of where who these Kusim are, where they're coming from, and what is related to our story. So when Shlomo Melech, King Solomon, was the son of King David. Shlomo Melech, when he was nifter, when he passed away, the people of the Jewish people, the people of Israel, went and coronated his son Rechavam. And now they went to Rechavam and said, "Listen, we were paying a lot of taxes. What's going to be now? Are you going to lower our taxes? Are you going to help us out over here?" And Rechavam, unfortunately, with bad advice that was taken by his young advisors, he said, no, we got to increase the taxes. And he says, not only am I not going to take away your heavy taxes, I'm going to make it extra, stronger, and I'm going to make it extra stricter. So hearing this, the people they decided they're going to take matters into their own hands. And not everybody, but mostly of the 10 tribes, they went and they decided that they're going to separate and they're going to make their own kingdom. And this was known as this was part of the northern part of Israel. And they decided they're going to set up their own kingdom, and they're going to set Yeravam ben Avot, Yeravam the son of Nevat, as their king. And this was known as the northern kingdom, or the 10 tribes as we know today. Now, Yeravam, who was the king of these 10 tribes, he realized that he's going to have a threat to his rulership. He got a position over here that he was ruling 10 tribes of Israel, and he wanted to keep it. But the problem is that the Beis HaMikdash, the temple, was not in his land. It was in the land that he didn't rule. It was the land of part of Yehuda, Binyamin, and Levi, which is the southern part of the southern kingdom of Israel. So now what he decided to do is that he decided that he's not going to allow people to go and travel to the Beis HaMikdash. Because he wanted... Now again, this was not based off a religious act. This was completely a political, tactic. And what he did was, which was very wrong, he placed shrines. He placed guards and he placed shrines at these junctions that people should be prevented from going to the Beis HaMikdash. And unfortunately, he spearheaded a new Avodah Zarah, idolatrous cult among the 10 tribes, which eventually destroyed them completely, spiritually and we'll soon see physically. Now, the kingdom of these 10 tribes throughout the years were universally wicked. They were not good, righteous, people that would go and take them in the way of the Torah, and they kind of had a different agenda. And the people ended up, unfortunately, sinking into a morass of idolatry. And even though a vast majority of the 10 tribes kept the Torah, they came to a point of beyond salvation. And even though HaKadosh Baruch Hu, God gave them time and time again for repentance, they did not repent. and their fate was eventually sealed. The kingdom of the 10 tribes lasted for a whopping 241 years. That's how merciful God was. He lasted 241 years just waiting for them to repent. And unfortunately, the exile of the 10 tribes ripped away about 80% of the Jewish population, and they were taken into, at that point, was the Assyrian captivity. The Assyrian policy was that they would remove the indigenous population wherever they were, and they would swap them with they would kind of repopulate them somewhere else, and they would take people of one country if they captured it, they would bring them to point B, and they would take people from point B and put them to point A. This is where the Kusim, which were known as the Samaritans, this is where they were swapped. So the 10 exiles were exiled to a certain extent, an unknown place. And Sancherib, the Assyrian ruler, went and replaced them with these Kusim that we're dealing with in our story. These Kusim, they were Ovid Avodah Zarah, they were idolaters. And they brought their gods from wherever they were to Israel, and they started worshiping their own gods. And what happened is that Eretz Yisrael is a very holy place. You bring tumah, you bring into it, it's not going to respond, the right way. And they brought these avodah zarah into the idols into the land of Israel. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu sent like a plague of wild lions. If there's any plague that you don't want, it's a plague of wild lions, right? There's one thing is if you see a deer in your backyard. There is even something that you see a bear in your backyard. But if you see a lion in your backyard, that's when you're going to start saying, you know what? I'm going to go inside. I'm not going to play around over here. There was a plague of wild lions. And they realized, they were like, wait a minute. Their thought process was the God of this land does not like the gods that we brought from our lands. So they decided they're going to worship the God of this land, which was HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But they didn't only worship one God, they also worshiped their own gods. So they worshiped both. They had their gods, and they had they worshiped also HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So these are the Kusim, these are the Samaritans that we're dealing with in the story with Alexander the Great. And just to give you a little bit of a historical understanding, let me tell you a little bit of just like to know where we're standing in history. So the Beis HaMikdash was built in the year 827 BCE. 271 years later, after the first Beis HaMikdash was built, this is where the 10 tribes were exiled by Sennacherib. 133 years after that, the first Beis HaMikdash was destroyed. About 66 years after that, that's when the story of Purim happened. And about 4 years later, the year 70 years after the destruction of the first Beis HaMikdash, that's when the second temple, the second Beis HaMikdash started being built. 40 years after that, that's where the story of Alexander the Great and Shimon Tzaddik, that's where our story begins. So now, going back to our original story with the Kusim, and this is based off the Gemara in Yuma, page 69. If anybody wants to look it up, these Kusim went and they falsely claimed that the Jews cursed the emperor during their prayers in the Beis HaMikdash. They went over to Alexander the Great and said, listen, so you have Jews living in Jerusalem, that they're going and they're cursing you and they want you to fail. Now, Alexander was furious to hear about this. This is a king who very much wants to go and spread out his name throughout the entire world. He put statues wherever he went. He was very much into his own fame. If you tell him that someone's cursing him, forget about it, right? Like as if he was in Brooklyn, right? Forget about it. He's going to go and take care of business. So he goes and he gathers his army and he starts marching towards Jerusalem. And the Jews hear about this. They were terrified. They were terrified on twofold. Number one, he's coming in based on false aspects. But number two, when Alexander the Great was fighting the Persian Empire, he came to the Jews and he asked them, can you help me? And they said, no, we're backing the Persians over here because we gave them our word. So now they're scared for two reasons over here. So they proclaimed public fasts, their Tanaisim and prayers, and Alexander the Great was coming. And when Shimon Tzaddik heard about this, Shimon HaTzadik was the Kohen Gadol. He dressed in his Bigdei Keuna. He dressed in his priestly garments, and he went together with thousands of young Kohanim that were bearing a torch, dressed in the Bigdei Keuna, and with a bunch of other dignitaries, and they went over to greet Alexander the Great. When Alexander the Great saw Shimon HaTzadik, he got off his horse and he bowed down. Now, to just tell you, this is the horse, right? This is the horse. This is the big horse. His horse was a huge horse. Alexander was a tall person, was a very big person. He also wore a plumed helmet, which made him even bigger. Standing all in all, he was over 13 feet high. It was a statement. If he goes and he gets off his horse, I don't know if anybody has ever rode a horse before, right? But generally, horses are big, but then there are big horses, right? If you ride an elephant, there's like a completely different ball game that we're playing over here. The horse that Alexander had was like a small elephant. It was like it was showing. He saw it. It was very interesting. He saw Shimon HaTzadik. They locked eyes, and he was coming to fight. He gets off his horse. This is Alexander the Great, who had one of the biggest egos in history. He goes and he bows down in front of Shimon HaTzadik. And it was so odd that his officers go over to him and they say, Alexander, and then they're like, I don't know what they called him, the Great or whatever it was, Mr. Great. What are you doing? You're bowing down to a Jew? Like, what's going on? And he responded, and he says, before every battle, he was very, very, very successful in his wars, to the point that he didn't lose a war. And he said, before every war, I see the vision of this man. This is the reason that I win my wars. And he went and he bowed down to Shimon HaTzadik. And he goes over to Shimon HaTzadik and says, what's up? What are you doing over here? And what did you come over here for? So Shimon HaTzadik, along with the entourage that came, and they responded in a very respectful manner. They said, is it possible that there are wicked people that are falsely leading you to destroy the very temple in which we pray daily for you and the longevity of your reign? And Alexander asked him, he says, what are you talking about? Who are these people? If you're doing so much for me, who are these people that want to destroy you like you're doing so much for me? And he points over to the Kusim, the Samaritans who are sitting right there, and he says, it's them. They're the ones that want to destroy us when we're only praying for your success. So Alexander the Great took the Samaritans and he goes over to Shimon HaTzadik and he says, you do with them as you please. He placed them in their hands. And Alexander made a peace treaty with Shimon HaTzadik. Shimon HaTzadik then went and he took Alexander the Great to the Beis HaMikdash. And they reached a point where no non-Jew is allowed to pass this point. And Alexander the Great wanted to go, and he said no. Shimon HaTzadik said, no, you're not allowed to pass this point. This is the point where non-Jews are allowed to go up till. More than this, you cannot go. So Alexander the Great didn't respond to that, but he said, okay, fine. I want to put a monument of me. Any monument you see of Alexander the Great, 9 out of 10, it's always with his horse. It's, you see his horse with a, this is his famous horse, the Basaphilus horse. And he wanted to put a monument of himself over there. And Shimon HaTzadik says, no, you can't put a monument over here. We Jews we are forbidden from making statues and graven images. But Shimon HaTzadik responded. He says, instead, what we're going to have done is that every Jewish boy that is born this year is going to be named Alexander after you. And Alexander was very happy with that, right? That would be a lot more. Shimon HaTzadik played this very well. But you knew that Alexander the Great was looking for his ego. And if he says, I want to put my statue over here, he's going to have to put his... But Alexander the Great said, no. Shimon HaTzadik told Alexander, says, no, we're going to do you better. We're going to name every Jewish boy that's born this year, we're going to name it after you. And that's where the name Alexander or Sender came, from that. The commentators of Mefarshim explain, but wait a minute. If you have someone here that's a wicked person, how could we name someone after them? So the Mefarshim explain that Alexander, he was a student of Aristotle. And Aristotle realized that there's only one God. And he passed this ideal to his student Alexander. And Alexander set to wage war against all these pagan nations. He realized that it's all nonsense. It's all not. Even though Greece, it's all about the so many multiple gods. Anywhere from Zeus to Nike to there's non-stop amount of gods that Greece had. And he realized that it was all nonsense. And he realized that there is one God, and this is based off his teaching that he had from his teacher. So because of that, the Mefarshim said it was right and it was okay for Shimon HaTzadik to go and have everybody name. Because at the end of the day, even though he did bad things, but he realized that there is one God. He realized there was a unity of one God. And this is very interesting. This is one of the reasons why he saw the vision of Shimon HaTzadik. Shimon HaTzadik represented the one God. And that is what he saw before he went into battle. And one of the aspects of his battles was he wanted to destroy this nonsense of idolatry. Even though, to a certain extent, the majority of his extent, he wasn't really successful in that. But that was his, according to the Mefarshim, that was his background. That was his thought process. Now, the Gemara in Tamid, page 32a, brings down a very interesting story. That the Gemara relates that Alexander the Great, he went and he posed 10 questions to the Ziknei HaNegev, the elders of the south, to Torah sages. And he went and he asked them a bunch of questions. And we'll soon see what was the reason behind these questions. He goes over the first question was, who is a chacham? Who is a wise person? So the elders responded, Haraya Sanailat, somebody who sees what will be. The Maharsha explains that basically, what does it mean that someone who sees what will be? Who's considered a wise person? Not that you have a lot of wisdom, that you're able to see what's going to happen in the future. You're able to predict what's going to happen based on the wisdom that you have in the past. The Maharsha takes this a step further. Haraya es hanoilad. You know who is wise? Someone haraya who sees es hanoilad. Noilad also means the future, but it could also mean noilad when you're born. Says the Maharsha, you want to know who's a wise person? Somebody who can see haraya es hanoilad, knows why he was born. What is the reason that you were placed on this earth? You want to be considered a wise person? You want to be considered a smart person? Why were you placed on this earth? Were you placed on this earth to open up a business after business after business and buy real estate after real estate after real estate, and folks, or were you here to accomplish something spiritually? The Maharsha explains this, that if you see the reason that you were put into this world, you are put into this world not to accomplish physically. You are put into this world to accomplish spiritually. That is somebody who is wise. That is somebody who is considered a chacham. The sages, the Alexander the Great went and asked the sages another question. So, who is a gibor? Who is somebody who is a mighty man? And the sages responded, you want to know who is a gibor? Who is a mighty? Someone who akoivesh as yitzray, someone who is able to go and conquer his yetzahara. You know what a mighty person is? A mighty person doesn't matter how much muscles and how much you can bench press and how many people you can beat up. A mighty person is how much you can conquer your evil inclination. Every single one of us has these desires, the things that we need to do. And you want to know what makes you mighty, what makes you strong? And that is, can you conquer your desires? We have desires for anger, for different pleasures, for different things. If you're able to overcome those desires, you are a gibor, you are a mighty person. And Alexander the Great went on and he said, who is an usher? Who is a wealthy person? And the sages responded, Ezu usher hasameach bechalkai, somebody who is happy with his lot. A wealthy person is not somebody who constantly goes and acquires more and more and has billions and billions of dollars. That's not a wealthy person. A wealthy person is someone who is satisfied with what he has. Because a wealthy person, at the end of the day, what defines wealth? What defines contentment? If you have billions of dollars in your bank and you don't have the ability to spend it, are you wealthy? No. You're wealthy when you're satisfied with what you have. True wealth is not measured by the amount of money that you have in your bank account, but it's rather if you're happy with what you have. Now the Maharsha asks, why did Alexander ask these questions? What's up with these questions? And the reason is that Alexander had a huge ego. And he wanted the sages of Israel. These are the sages. These are the smartest, most sophisticated, most advanced intellectually people on planet Earth. These are the Chachamim during the time of Alexander the Great. There's a time during the second Beis Hamikdash. What is it? He wanted them to praise him. I want you to praise me. He said, what is what is a wise man? Meaning that he learned by Aristotle. He was waiting for them, be like, wait a minute. They were supposed to answer, you are a wise man, because you learned you have the Aristotle wisdom. Ezo Hagib, who is a mighty person? I conquered so many lands. Of course, he was saying, who is a mighty person? They were saying, he was the most mightiest person alive at that time. And he was fishing for compliments. So he goes over to the sages, who is wealthy, who is mighty, he was looking for them to say, you Alexander the Great, you Alexander the Great. That's what he was looking. But the sages did not respond that. The sages said, oh, you want to know who is wise? Harayas and someone who sees the future. Nothing to do with you. You're not wise. Okay, who's a mighty person? I conquered so many lands. I rule over the entire world. And he said, no. That has not might. That has nothing to do with might. You want to know might? If you're able to overcome your desires. And then he said, okay, fine, but who is wealthy? I have so much wealth. During the time of the story of Purim, we know how much wealth Ahasuerus had. Alexander the Great was able to capture the entire wealth of Persian Empire. So he was extremely wealthy. He was waiting to say, okay, obviously, money in the bank, that talks. Obviously, you're going to have to say that it's me. I am the most wealthiest person alive today. You have to say that it's me. And they said, no, it's nothing to do with you. You want to know who's wealthy? Someone who's satisfied with what he has. Alexander was never satisfied with what he had. So the elders, the Zakanim, told straightforward to Alexander the Great that he did not possess any of these great attributes, that he was fishing for compliments. So obviously this didn't make Alexander the Great super duper happy. He was kind of upset during this situation that he was looking for compliments and no compliments came forth. And he went over to the sages and he says, who is the wisest among you? Meaning that he wanted them to figure out and he was going to take revenge on that person. And he's going to say, you know what? Let me take revenge on that person, because obviously you're not showing that I am the most wisest, most powerful, most successful, most richest person in the world. And they responded to them without fearing him. We're all, equally wise. We all came to this conclusion by ourselves. So Alexander responded, and he said, I don't understand. He says, you know how strong I am. You know that my, thought process is not always up to par with, I don't think he said this, but he was known that he wasn't the most logical person at that time. He murdered his own advisors. So they replied that he said, listen, he said, what is true, and we respond to what's true. They knew that they were correct on every point. So Alexander told him, he says, you defeated me in my debate, but now you deserve death. So the Zakanim responded back, says, wait a minute. He says, you promised us before this debate that if we would win, you wouldn't harm us. So Alexander went and he dressed these Zakanim in purple, Argamon, this royal color, and he placed golden ornaments around them as a sign of deference, as a sign of respect, to them. Meaning that even at this point in time, Alexander the Great was the most egotistical person ever, and the Chachamim, they realized, they said, wait a minute, it says, this is what's true. And we're not going to deviate from the truth, and we're going to tell you as it is. Political correctness, there was nothing of that. There's a woke environment, there was nothing of that. This is what's true, and this is what we're going to tell you. And that's what they said straight out. And they, who knows what's going to happen when you're dealing with something. But Alexander the Great respected them for that. And respect them for what they said, the honesty that they said. The hour is getting a little bit late. I wanted to go, we just basically started on Alexander the Great. I wanted to speak about Shimon HaTzadik and how it relates to it, but we're going to have to hold off because I don't like to rush through these things. So we're Hashem next week we're going to speak about Shimon HaTzadik, but just to understand who Alexander the Great was. Alexander the Great was a very, very egotistical person. He was very much, you could see all about the statues that he placed throughout the entire place that he conquered was always statues upon himself. And he went and he only cared about himself, and still the Chachamim, they said, this is what's right, we're not going to stand down. I'm not going to be scared about you. If this is what's right, then this is what we're going to stand for, and this is what we're going to say. And how true it is in this day and age. There is so much fake stuff going out in the world with the gender stuff, and I don't even want. If I'm going to go down this path, it's going to be a problem. Not for anybody else, just for my blood pressure. The truth is, because it like the stupidity of where we have landed as a society. We can't even begin to understand, like, how do we end up over here? And one of the reasons is because we're afraid. We're always people pleasers. We always want to please we always want to say what the other person wants to hear. A lesson that you could learn from the Chachamim over here. Many lessons, and we're going to soon, B'ezrat Hashem, we'll speak about it in our next class. But one of the many lessons is that if something is true, just stick to it. Forget about the PC culture that we're living with, the woke culture, the stupidity of the society that we live in, of what the for anywhere from gender to from the LGBTQ, the stupidity that we live in. If something is true, we stick to that. And you know what? Alexander was the most, there's nobody that has a higher ego today that has a higher ego than Alexander. And when the Chachamim stuck to their guns and said, no, this is the honest truth and this is what we're going to, guess what? Alexander respected them. Alexander the Great respected them. Now, with this being said, this is really going to end up being, I didn't think that it would be a two-part series, but it's going to, because Hashem wanted it, with Hashem's help, it's going to be a two-part series. We have to understand the aspect of where Alexander the Great is coming from, and then we're going to learn the history of Shimon HaTzadik, and then when we plug them in together, we're going to be able to see what Shimon HaTzadik taught us and the reason of why he taught that to us. And with that, we will open up to any questions. Okay, first we have to bring up a question. I see that it wasn't brought in over here, but a question that was brought up before we started the class. And that is, you know what, the truth is, the more that I'm thinking about it, the more that I'm going to go off on a way big. You know what? Okay, fine. The question just came through, so I'm gonna have to respond about it. Let me read the question. I've been thinking about it, but because the question just came in again, I'm gonna respond to it now. So let me just read the question. Rabbi, please share about the times now. We can't trust simple places that are now having mass shootings. For example, the library, the grocery, the stores, the synagogues, the Hebrew schools. We're in a bubble of learning and growing, and we can't trust. And I want to answer this on a little bit of a different level. There's a lot that I have to speak about this. And I don't want to make this personal because that's the part when you're not thinking logically. And I'll tell you why I'm coming from that angle. Over the years, I've done many, many, many favors for many, many different people. And some people are very grateful and they respond graciously and may they be blessed until 120. And other people, and this is not new, the Chachamim tell us this, that if you do favors for somebody, just expect that they're going to do something bad. They're gonna respond in a negative manner. And that is that I've noticed that the more I've done for people, the more that kind of I get a very, very negative response. And I'm hesitant in the words that I'm using because I don't want to reveal who I'm speaking about, because again, it's not related to like anything, but like over the years, like I've done a lot of favors for many people, organizations, like from a wide spectrum of things. And Baruch Hashem, HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave me the siyat d'shmaya, the bracha, the ability to be able to be involved, and I'm very happy that I did it. And some, not all of them, but some of the organizations, some of the people, I realized I can't say they come against me, but they kind of against, but like not fully, like against. And I was thinking at one point, maybe I should take this personally, but I decided not to, because I don't know. I generally don't take things that personal. Baruch Hashem, and that's one of the reasons that I'm able to do what I'm able to do. And one of the things that I notice is that no matter how much you do for somebody, the way that you're able to determine your authenticity of what you're doing is by realizing how much that bothers you. And I realized that if this bothers me a lot, that means that everything that I did until now was not really that authentic, because I did it for okay, wait a minute, I did it for you, now you owe me. But if I do it and I'm like, okay, I did it for Hashem, I did it for God, and you don't owe me anything because I didn't do it for you, I did it for God, then okay, you're going to go against me, you're not going to go against me, it's irrelevant. I didn't do it for you. I don't care, if you're going to go against me, because I did it for God. I did it for HaKadosh Baruch Hu's children, the Jewish people, and that's the reason that I did it. So, in brief, and this is very brief because I could speak about this in such length, but I really want to keep it brief. We have these this places or people that we feel like we can't trust, and there's the shootings, whatever it is. If we feel affected by these things, then we have to realize that we're not that genuine as we thought we were. If we really, really want to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu, if we really want to serve God, then if people offend you, if people don't follow you, if people hurt you, if people are not genuine to you, it is what it is. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter, because I'm not doing this for the respect. I'm not doing this for the comfort. I'm not doing this for the ability to believe that I have a safe haven in this location. But you know why I'm coming to these places? You know why I'm doing what I'm doing is because I am doing it for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. God has given me everything, and anything that I've ever had is all because of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Now, I may not understand everything, and I may not come to the conclusion of realizing of why this person is doing what they're doing. But if I understand what I did and what I am doing and what I will do is only for HaKadosh Baruch Hu, then guess what? If people are not going to follow you, if people are not going to do with what you do, people are going to go against you, if people are going to fight against, whatever you're going to be able to do, and you don't feel that comfort, and you don't feel that, a lot of us, we like to feel our home, right? Our home, that's our solidarity. That is our place of where we have that ability to feel, this is my base, and no one can mess with me, because this is what I built. I've come in from who knows how far, and I have come to here because of what I did. Guess what? If you have that thought process, it wasn't genuine. Now, one of the things that anybody that knows me knows that I don't speak about what people want to hear. I speak about what I believe. And this will offend some people. And for that, I am partially sorry, because I don't like to offend people, but it has to come through the truth. We have to realize that no matter where we have reached in our lives, and I guarantee you, what I'm saying right now, I'm saying it in a very, very broad way. But you could, each and every single one of you that is listening to this message, can hear that internally and put that into your own life, that wherever you have reached in your life, you have been insulted. You have been you felt that you have got violated to a certain extent. And you want to know why you feel that way? Because you did something that you feel you didn't deserve. You did something for that other person. He says, I didn't deserve that reciprocation of that. I accomplished so much, God. I have come so far. Why have you been giving me this? That means that everything that you have done was not l'shem shamayim. Now, it's not all over yet, because if you're listening to this, you can really think about it. Be like, wait a minute, let me change my mindset. You know what, Kadosh Baruch Hu? You have not thrown the dice the way that I've wanted it to. But guess what? Everything that I've done until now, I am thankful and I'm happy that I've done it, even though it hasn't reciprocated in what happened. Now, again, what I'm saying right now has a little bit of a personal, issue into it, and I'm honestly speaking more to myself than to anybody else. Most of the time, I speak to other people, but right now, my honest truth, I'm speaking to myself, because I do, and I try to give, and I try to give, and I give, and I give, and I give, and I feel like sometimes I really get it back, like in a negative way. And I have to think about, like, wait a minute, why is it that I am doing this? Like, what am I doing this for? Am I doing it for my covet? Then guess what? Like, for my it's not worth it for my covet. Like, honestly, it's really not worth it for my covet. I'd rather not do this for my covet. But the honest truth, I'm doing because this is what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants, to spread Torah, to go and spread it out. He wants to give so much, and He wants us to continue to doing the right thing. And we're not doing it for ourselves. We're doing it none other than HaKadosh Baruch Hu told us to do it. And we are slaves to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us everything, and we owe Him everything. And that's why I am here, and that's why I do what I am doing. And each and every single one of you are doing things right now, and later you're going to come to the realization that, like, wait a minute, but like, I don't deserve this. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, why? Why are you doing this to me? And the reason is stop for a second. And I can guarantee you this. Oh, this is a guarantee. That if you realize right then and there that you said, you know what, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I'm doing this for you, not for me. I can guarantee you, to a certain extent, that whatever I can guarantee you, that all of a sudden you're going to see the problems, they're going to melt away. All the stuff is going to melt away. This is the aspect of Emunah and Bitachon, right? But once you realize that it's all HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and all you want to do is just for HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you're going to realize that everything's going to melt away. The truth of the matter is that the person that asked this question, it has really very little to do with that question. I really went off on a tangent, but I feel like it's an important aspect, at least for me. If this is none other than just for me to, to hear, or to hear myself, right? Sometimes, the best therapy is when you hear yourself. Just to tell you a story that just popped into my mind. There was a Rav that was a doctor. I'll tell you the name, and I'm trying to remember. I believe it's Rabbi Dr. Weinreb. Don't quote me on that, because I'm saying the story off memory. I didn't prepare to say the story. I read the story a while back. I believe this was him. And he was in his young 30s. He was in Baltimore. And he was trying to figure out what to do with his life. He had a lot of questions. And he decided that he wanted to reach out to the Lubavitcher Rebbe. The Lubavitcher Rebbe was alive, and says, I need help with the Lubavitcher Rebbe. So he couldn't make it to the Lubavitcher Rebbe, so he called over the Gabbai. And he told the Gabbai, he says, I need to speak to the Lubavitcher Rebbe. I'm a man from Baltimore, and I have some questions. So the Lubavitcher Rebbe, assistant, he went over to the Rebbe, and he said, I need, I have a man on the phone. He's from Baltimore, and he needs to speak to you. He has questions about his life. And the Lubavitcher Rebbe responded to him. He says, if he's from Baltimore and he asked questions about his life, this man had questions. He was a Rav. He had, he wasn't sure which path to take. Maybe he should go through more in the secular. Maybe he should go more. He wasn't sure which path to take. The Lubavitcher Rebbe responded. I believe his name was Weinreb. He said to the Lubavitcher Rebbe responded. He says, if he's from Baltimore. Now, the Lubavitcher Rebbe never heard his name. He doesn't know who this person was. He doesn't know that this person, his name is Weinreb, because the Weinreb never mentioned to the Gabbai who he was. He just said, I'm a man from Baltimore that needs help with the Rebbe. So the Rebbe responded, if you're from Baltimore and you need help, there is a man by the name of Weinreb in Baltimore. Go and speak to him. So the Gabbai hears this, and he goes over to the man on the phone, and he says, by the way, the Rebbe just said that there's a man, Weinreb, in Baltimore. If you need to speak to the Rebbe, you want to speak to somebody, speak to this Weinreb over there. And this Rabbi Weinreb he's like, what? He's like, I am that Weinreb. Like, that's me. I'm the one. I need to speak to I am the Weinreb. And the Rebbe says, then you need to speak to yourself. This Rabbi Weinreb was a very successful, very, very, big Rav. And he says, that's who you need to speak to. And many times in our life, we do many, many things, and we don't realize, who we need to speak to figure out where we're holding and why we're down and why we need to fix it. Why we need to speak to ourselves. Yes, it's important to go to the Rabbanim and Red Sits, but sometimes we need to look in the mirror and talk to ourselves in the most normal way possible, right? What's going on? Why are you here? Why are you upset? Why are you sad? Why are you down? Why? Look, once we started covering this, that's where all our answers will lie. Went off a little bit on a tangent, but there's a lot more that I want to speak about that. I'm actually holding myself back on that, but just a little bit of a tidbit of information based off the question. Again, the person asked the question, I probably didn't answer your question fully, but I kind of went on a tangent based on my own personal things. So I hope that you all gained from that tangent. I feel it was important. And looks like that was the final question to each and every single one of us. May we have a most amazing, successful week.